The dust-caked stagecoach rattled into Durango, Colorado on a blazing August afternoon in 1878, carrying a young woman who would change everything for a broken rancher and his motherless daughters. Felicity Warren pressed her handkerchief to her lips, filtering the grit that seemed determined to coat her lungs. At 22 years old, she had traveled from Boston with nothing but 2 trunks of belongings, a teaching certificate, and a determination to escape the suffocating expectations of her wealthy family. They had wanted her to marry Theodore Ashworth, a man 3 times her age with wandering hands and whiskey breath. Instead, she had answered an advertisement in the Boston Herald seeking a governess for 2 young girls on a Colorado ranch. The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the general store, and Felicity gathered her carpetbag with trembling fingers. Through the dusty window, she could see the rough wooden buildings lining the main street, so different from the brick and cobblestone of Boston. Men in worn denim and leather vests moved along the wooden sidewalks, their spurs jingling with each step. A few women in simple calico dresses hurried past, their faces weathered by the high-altitude sun. "Miss Warren," a deep voice called as she stepped down from the coach. Felicity turned and found herself looking up at a tall man with shoulders broad enough to block out the sun. He wore a dusty brown hat pulled low over his eyes, but she could still make out strong features carved from what seemed like granite. His jaw was set in a hard line, and his eyes, a striking gray-blue like storm clouds over the ocean, studied her with obvious skepticism. "I am Felicity Warren," she said, straightening her spine and meeting his gaze directly. "And you must be Mr. Caldwell Rivers." "Just Rivers," he said curtly. He gestured toward a wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses. "Let's get your things loaded. It's a 2-hour ride to the ranch, and I want to be back before dark." His bluntness stung, but Felicity refused to show it. She had not traveled 2,000 miles to be cowed by a surly rancher. "Of course. I have 2 trunks on the back of the coach." Rivers nodded to a younger man standing nearby, who quickly helped transfer her belongings to the wagon. The rancher himself barely looked at her as he climbed onto the driver's seat and waited for her to settle beside him. No hand offered to help her up. No polite conversation. Felicity gripped the side of the wagon and pulled herself up with as much dignity as she could muster. They rode in silence through the dusty streets of Durango and out into the open landscape beyond. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. Pine trees clustered on the hillsides, and the air smelled of sage and something wild that Felicity could not name. It was beautiful in a harsh, untamed way that made her heart beat faster. "My daughters are 8 and 10, Rivers finally said, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Sarah is the eldest. Emma is the youngest. Their mother died 3 years ago in childbirth. The baby did not survive either." The pain in his voice, carefully controlled but present nonetheless, made Felicity's throat tighten. "I am very sorry for your loss. They have been running wild since then," he continued as if she had not spoken. "The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, tries her best, but she has enough to do keeping the house and cooking for the ranch hands. The girls need proper schooling, proper manners. That is why I placed the advertisement." "I understand. I brought textbooks for mathematics, reading, geography, and history. I also thought we might study art and music if you approve." For the first time, Rivers turned to look at her fully. His eyes swept over her face with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "Music. I play the piano. I thought I might teach the girls if you have an instrument. If not, we can study singing. Music is important for a well-rounded education." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face, softening the hard lines for just a moment. "We have a piano. My wife played. No one has touched it since she passed. Felicity nodded, sensing the grief that still hung heavy on this man like a winter coat in summer. She wanted to ask more, to understand the woman who had left such a wound behind, but the walls Rivers had built around himself were clear. Instead, she turned her attention to the landscape rolling past. The ranch appeared after they crested a long hill. It sprawled across a valley between two ridges, with a substantial two-story house at its center. Barns and outbuildings dotted the property, and Felicity could see cattle grazing in distant pastures. It was larger than she had expected, speaking of prosperity and hard work. "You run cattle?" she asked. "Cattle and horses. We breed quarter horses for ranch work, best in 3 counties. There was pride in his voice now, the first real emotion besides grief that she had heard. As the wagon rolled up to the house, 2 small figures burst through the front door. The girls were as different as night and day. The older one, Sarah, had her father's dark hair pulled back in a messy braid, her dress stained with what looked like mud. The younger, Emma, was blonde like her mother must have been, her face covered in freckles and her feet bare despite the rough ground. "Papa!" Emma shrieked, running toward the wagon. "Did you bring her? Is she here?" "Mind your manners, Emma," Rivers said, but his voice had softened considerably. He climbed down and caught the youngest girl as she launched herself at him. "Yes, Miss Warren is here. Remember what we discussed about proper behavior." Emma squirmed in her father's arms, craning her neck to look at Felicity. "Are you really going to be our teacher? Mrs. Chen said you came all the way from Boston. That is where they had the tea party, right? The one with the harbor." Despite the difficult journey and Rivers' cold reception, Felicity found herself smiling. "The Boston Tea Party, yes, though that happened a long time before I was born." Sarah stood back, watching with eyes too serious for a 10-year-old. "How long are you staying?" "Sarah," Rivers said in a warning tone. "It is a fair question," Felicity said gently. She climbed down from the wagon and knelt so she could meet Sarah's eyes at her level. "The advertisement said for at least a year, possibly longer. I came prepared to stay as long as I am needed and welcome." "The last governess left after 2 weeks," Sarah said flatly. "She said we were wild savages and she would not waste her time on children who preferred climbing trees to learning French verbs." Felicity bit back a smile. "Well, I should tell you that I am quite good at climbing trees myself. I used to race my brother to the top of the oak in our garden. As for French verbs, they are important, but so is understanding the world around you. I suspect you have already learned quite a bit that children in Boston never will." Something shifted in Sarah's expression, a crack in her defensive armor. Emma wiggled free from her father's arms and grabbed Felicity's hand. "I like you," the little girl announced. "You smell like roses, and your dress is very pretty, even though it is all dusty now." "Thank you, Emma." "I like you too." Rivers cleared his throat. "Let's get Miss Warren settled. She has had a long journey." The inside of the house surprised Felicity. She had expected rough frontier living, but the rooms were well furnished with quality pieces that spoke of care and taste. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, and the promised piano sat in the corner, covered with a cloth. Photographs in silver frames lined the mantel, and Felicity caught a glimpse of a beautiful blonde woman smiling from one of them before Rivers ushered her toward the stairs. "Your room is up here," he said. "You will have privacy and space to prepare lessons. Breakfast is at 6, dinner at noon, supper at 7. The girls usually wake around 7, so you can begin instruction at 8 after they have finished their morning chores." "Chores?" Felicity asked, following him down a hallway lined with more photographs. "This is a working ranch. Everyone contributes. The girls feed the chickens, collect eggs, and help in the garden. They need to understand responsibility. Felicity nodded approvingly. I agree completely. Rivers paused, his hand on a doorknob, and looked at her with surprise. You do? Of course. Work builds character. In Boston, too many children are raised by servants with no understanding of how households function. Your daughters are learning valuable skills. For the first time, Rivers' stern expression softened into something almost like a smile. Miss Warren, you might just surprise me. He opened the door to reveal a spacious bedroom with a large window overlooking the valley. The bed was covered with a beautiful quilt in shades of blue and green, and a small desk sat beneath the window. It was simply furnished but clean and welcoming. This was meant to be the nursery, Rivers said quietly. After my wife. After we lost the baby, I could not bear to keep it that way. I hope it suits you. It is lovely, Felicity said honestly. Thank you. Rivers nodded and turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. Miss Warren, I should tell you that I am not an easy man. This ranch requires most of my time and all of my energy. I hired you to care for my daughter's education because I cannot do it myself. I expect you to be firm with them but fair. They have been through enough hardship. They do not need cruelty added to it. Mr. Rivers, I would never, Felicity began, but he held up his hand. I have learned not to make assumptions about people's character based on first impressions. You seem genuine, but time will tell. Supper is in 2 hours. Mrs. Chen will show you the washroom if you want to freshen up. He left before she could respond, his boots heavy on the wooden stairs. Felicity sat down on the bed and took a deep breath. The rancher was as rough and unpolished as the land around him, but she had glimpsed something beneath the harsh exterior. Pain, yes, and grief still raw after 3 years, but also love for his daughters and pride in his work. It was more than many men showed. She unpacked her things, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her books on the desk. The photograph of her own family, taken before she left Boston, she placed on the nightstand. Her parents looked stern and disapproving even in the image, and her brother stood behind them with his habitual bored expression. She had written to tell them she arrived safely, but doubted they cared much. They had made their feelings clear when she refused Theodore Ashworth's proposal. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Miss Warren, I am Mrs. Chen. Mr. Rivers said you might want to wash before supper. Felicity opened the door to find a small Chinese woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple dress with an apron and held fresh towels in her arms. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I would appreciate that very much. The housekeeper led her to a washroom with a pump and basin. The girls are excited about you, she said in lightly accented English. They need a woman's influence. Mr. Rivers does his best, but a father cannot teach everything a daughter needs to know. How long have you worked here? Felicity asked, grateful for the warm water Mrs. Chen had ready, since before Mrs. Rivers passed. I came to Durango with my husband in 1870. He worked on the railroad until he was killed in an accident. Mr. Rivers gave me work when no one else would hire a Chinese widow. He is a good man, though he hides it behind gruffness. He seems very devoted to his daughters. He is devoted to this ranch and to their memory of their mother, Mrs. Chen corrected gently. But devoted to living, that he gave up 3 years ago. He works himself until he can barely stand, then falls into bed only to rise before dawn and do it again. It is no life for a man still young. Felicity washed her face and hands, considering Mrs. Chen's words. How old is Mr. Rivers? 31. He married young at 21. His wife was 19. They were very happy together. So young to be a widower, Felicity thought. And still carrying the weight of that loss like stones in his pockets. Supper that evening was a lively affair, despite River's quiet presence at the head of the table. Emma chattered constantly about everything from the new kittens in the barn to the snake Sarah had found near the creek. Sarah herself was more reserved but watched Felicity with curious eyes. The food was simple but delicious. Mrs. Chen had prepared roast chicken with potatoes and fresh vegetables from the garden. Felicity noticed that Rivers ate mechanically, barely tasting his food, his mind clearly elsewhere. "Miss Warren, can you really play the piano?" Emma asked, bouncing in her seat. "Mama used to play for us before bed. I do not remember it very well, but Sarah says it was beautiful." River's fork paused halfway to his mouth, and tension suddenly filled the room. "Emma," Sarah whispered urgently, "we are not supposed to talk about Mama at the table." "Why not?" Emma's lower lip jutted out. "Miss Warren asked about Mama, did she not?" "I did not, actually," Felicity said carefully, "but I would love to hear about her if your father does not mind. It helps me understand you better." All eyes turned to Rivers. He set down his fork with deliberate care and looked at his youngest daughter. "Your mama played beautifully. She learned from her mother in Virginia before we came west. And yes, she played for you every night before bed. Your favorite song was Greensleeves." Emma beamed. "I knew it. Sarah said I was making it up, but I knew I remembered." "You were only 5, Emma," Sarah said. "I am not sure how you could remember." "Some things stay with us even when we are young," Felicity said softly. "I remember my grandmother singing to me when I was very small. She died when I was 6, but I can still hear her voice sometimes." Rivers met her eyes across the table, and for a moment the walls came down. She saw gratitude there and something else, a connection that neither of them had expected. Then he blinked and the walls were back up. "Miss Warren, when would you like to begin the girls' lessons?" he asked. "Tomorrow morning, if that suits everyone. I thought we might start with an assessment to understand what they already know." "We can raid," Sarah said defensively. "Mama taught us before she died, and Mrs. Chen has kept up with it." "I am sure you can. Can you write as well?" "Of course." "Then we will work on expanding your skills. Reading and writing are tools that open the world. The better you master them, the more you can learn about everything else." After supper, Rivers excused himself to check on the horses, leaving Felicity with the girls and Mrs. Chen. Emma tugged on Felicity's sleeve. "Will you play the piano for us? Please? Papa never takes the cover off anymore." Felicity glanced at Mrs. Chen, who nodded encouragingly. It would be good for the house to hear music again. Together, they removed the cloth covering the instrument. The piano was a beautiful upright in dark walnut, clearly well made and expensive. Felicity sat on the bench and ran her fingers over the keys. It was slightly out of tune but still playable. "What would you like to hear?" she asked the girls. "Greensleeves," Emma cried. Felicity began to play, her fingers finding the familiar melody. The notes filled the room, sweet and melancholy. Emma climbed onto the bench beside her, watching her hands move across the keys with wide eyes. Sarah stood nearby, her arms crossed, but Felicity could see tears gathering in the corner of her eyes. She transitioned from Greensleeves into a livelier tune, a folk song she had learned as a child. Emma started to hum along, then to sing the words when Felicity taught them to her. Even Sarah's defenses cracked enough for her to smile. They did not notice Rivers standing in the doorway until Felicity finished the song. He leaned against the frame, his hat in his hands, watching them with an expression that was equal parts pain and wonder. "It has been 3 years since this house heard music," he said quietly. "I had forgotten what it sounded like." "I hope you do not mind," Felicity said quickly. Emma asked, and I thought, "I do not mind." He stepped into the room, moving closer to the piano. "My wife would have wanted the girls to learn. She always said music feeds the soul." She was right, Felicity said. Would you like to hear anything particular? Rivers shook his head. Just knowing it will be played again is enough for tonight. Girls, time for bed. Miss Warren needs her rest too. The girls protested but obeyed, hugging Felicity goodnight before running upstairs. Mrs. Chen followed to make sure they actually prepared for bed rather than causing mischief. Alone with Rivers, Felicity suddenly felt nervous. He was studying her again with those storm cloud eyes, and she could not read his expression. "Thank you," he finally said, "for earlier, at supper, the way you talked about their mother." Most people avoid the subject entirely, as if pretending she never existed will somehow hurt less. "Grief demands acknowledgement," Felicity said. "Pretending does not make it disappear. It just makes it harder to bear alone. You sound like you have experience with loss." "My grandmother, as I mentioned, and a younger sister who died of scarlet fever when I was 16. My parents never spoke of her afterward. They packed away her things and acted as if she had never been born. It made the pain so much worse." Rivers nodded slowly. "I did not want to do that to the girls, but I also did not know how to keep talking about her without falling apart myself, so I said nothing and they learned to do the same, until tonight." "They need to remember her," Felicity said gently, "and so do you. Remembering is not the same as staying trapped in the past." He looked at her for a long moment, and Felicity felt heat rise in her cheeks under the intensity of his gaze. "You are not what I expected, Miss Warren." "What did you expect? Someone older, stricter, less?" He trailed off, seeming to search for words. "Less what?" "Less everything you are," he said finally. "I should let you rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. The girls have energy enough for 10 children." He left before she could respond, and Felicity sat at the piano, her heart beating faster than it should. Something had shifted in that conversation, a crack in the armor both of them wore. She was not sure if that was dangerous or exactly what she had been looking for when she fled Boston. The first week passed in a blur of activity. Felicity quickly discovered that while the girls were bright and eager to learn, they had indeed been running wild. Sarah could read at a high level but could barely write a coherent sentence. Emma knew her numbers but had no concept of basic arithmetic. Both girls had extensive knowledge of ranch life, animals, and the natural world but had never heard of the Constitution or the war between the states. Felicity established a routine. Mornings were for academic subjects: reading, writing, arithmetic, and history. Afternoons were for music, art, and what she called practical learning, which included everything from proper table manners to letter writing to basic first aid. The girls tested her constantly in those first days, trying to see how far they could push before she broke. She did not break. When Sarah deliberately spilled ink all over a perfectly good sheet of paper, Felicity simply handed her a rag and said, "Clean it up, then start again. We will stay until it is done correctly, even if it takes until supper time." When Emma claimed she could not possibly learn multiplication, Felicity brought out dried beans and had her count them into groups until the pattern became clear. When both girls tried to sneak out of the house during lesson time, Felicity followed them to the barn and held classes there, teaching them about the biology of the horses while incorporating vocabulary and spelling into the lesson. Rivers noticed. He said little, but Felicity caught him watching from a distance as she worked with the girls. One afternoon, she found him in the barn as she finished an impromptu lesson on the parts of a saddle. "You do not teach like the other governess," he observed, leaning against a stall door. "The other governess did not last long enough to teach much of anything," Felicity replied, helping Emma properly pronounce the word stirrup. "True enough. But you understand something she did not. The girls need to see how learning applies to their lives. French verbs meant nothing to them." understanding why a horse needs a properly fitted saddle that they can grasp. They are smart girls, Felicity said. They just need someone to meet them where they are instead of demanding they become something else entirely. Rivers smiled, a real smile that transformed his whole face. You are wise beyond your years, Miss Warren. I am 22, Mr. Rivers, not a child. I am aware. His eyes held hers for a moment too long, and Felicity felt that flutter in her chest again. And please call me Caleb. Mr. Rivers makes me feel like my father. Then you must call me Felicity, at least when the girls are not around. I think they need the formality of Miss Warren for now. Agreed. He pushed off from the stall door. Felicity it is. The way he said her name, careful and deliberate, made her pulse quicken. She turned back to the girls quickly, hoping the dim light of the barn hid her flushed cheeks. By the end of the second week, Felicity had established herself as a fixture in the household. Mrs. Chen praised her help in the kitchen, where she taught the girls to cook while incorporating lessons on measurements and fractions. The ranch hands tipped their hats respectfully when she passed, and the girls, resistant at first, had begun to warm to her genuinely. Sarah was the harder one to crack. She protected her heart fiercely, afraid to let anyone close enough to hurt her again. But one evening, Felicity found the girl crying in the garden, clutching a worn rag doll. "Sarah, what is wrong?" The girl quickly wiped her eyes. "Nothing, I am fine." Felicity sat down on the ground beside her, heedless of her dress. "You do not have to be fine all the time, you know. It is all right to miss your mother." "I am the oldest," Sarah said fiercely. "I have to be strong for Emma. She barely remembers Mama. If I cry, it makes it worse for her." "Oh, sweetheart." Felicity put her arm around the girl's thin shoulders. "You are 10 years old. You should not have to carry that burden alone. Papa tries, but he has the ranch, and he still gets sad about Mama. I can see it in his eyes even when he does not say anything. I am sure he does. But that does not mean you have to hide your own sadness. Grief is not a competition. You can all miss her together." Sarah leaned into Felicity's embrace, and the dam finally broke. She sobbed like the child she was, releasing 3 years of held-back tears. Felicity held her, stroking her hair and murmuring comfort. They sat that way until Sarah's tears subsided. "Do you think Mama would be proud of me?" the girl asked in a small voice. "I think your Mama would be incredibly proud of the strong, smart, caring girl you have become. And I think she would want you to let yourself be happy, not just survive." Sarah nodded against Felicity's shoulder. "I like you, Miss Warren. I did not want to, but I do." "I like you too, Sarah, very much." From that night on, Sarah's walls came down. She threw herself into her studies with new enthusiasm and began to smile more often. Emma, already affectionate, became Felicity's shadow whenever lessons were not in session. Caleb noticed the change in his daughters. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, he found Felicity on the front porch, enjoying the cool air and the spectacular sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "May I join you?" he asked. "Of course." He sat on the porch railing, his long legs stretched out in front of him. "I want to thank you. The girls, they are different, happier." Sarah smiled at supper tonight, a real smile, not the polite one she has worn like armor for 3 years. "They are wonderful girls. They just needed someone to see them, really see them. You do that, see people." He was quiet for a moment, studying the sunset. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask. I may not answer." He smiled slightly. "Fair enough. Why did you really come west? A woman with your education and obvious breeding could have had her pick of positions in Boston. What made you travel 2,000 miles to teach 2 wild girls on a Colorado ranch?" Felicity considered how much to tell him. "My parents wanted me to marry a man I could not stand. A wealthy man, well-connected, everything they valued. He was also cruel and controlling. When I refused, they made it clear I was no longer welcome in their home unless I changed my mind. So I did not change my mind. I left instead. Caleb's jaw tightened. They chose money over their own daughter's happiness. Some people value appearance more than reality. I am not sure my parents ever understood that happiness cannot be purchased or arranged. I am sorry you went through that, but I am grateful you made the choice you did. The girls need you. He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. They have not been this alive since their mother died. They are easy to love, Felicity said softly. So are you. The words came out before Caleb seemed to realize he was saying them. His eyes widened slightly and he stood abruptly. I mean, the girls find you easy to love. Obviously. Because you are good with them. Felicity's heart was racing, but she kept her voice steady. I understood what you meant. Did you? He looked at her with such intensity that she could not look away. Because I am not sure I do. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then a coyote howled in the distance, breaking the spell. Caleb cleared his throat. I should check on the livestock. Good night, Felicity. Good night, Caleb. She watched him walk toward the barn, his stride long and purposeful. Mrs. Chen's words came back to her. Devoted to this ranch and to their memory of their mother, but devoted to living. That he gave up 3 years ago. Felicity wondered if that was beginning to change. The weeks turned into a month, then 2. Summer faded into autumn, and the aspen trees on the mountainsides turned gold. Felicity settled into life on the ranch with surprising ease. She helped with the harvest from the garden, learning to can vegetables under Mrs. Chen's patient instruction. She rode into Durango with Caleb to buy supplies, enjoying the chance to explore the town and meet its residents. She taught the girls not just academics, but also how to sew, how to conduct themselves in company, how to write letters that were both proper and personal. And slowly, carefully, she and Caleb circled each other like cautious animals, drawn together but afraid to take the final step. He began joining the evening music lessons, sitting in the corner of the parlor and watching as Felicity taught the girls to play simple melodies on the piano. Sometimes he would share stories of his wife, painful at first but gradually becoming easier. Felicity learned that Margaret Rivers had been the daughter of a Virginia plantation owner who had lost everything in the war. She and Caleb had met in Kansas, both heading west to start new lives. They had built the ranch together from nothing, working side by side through brutal winters and dry summers. She was the strongest person I ever knew, Caleb said one evening, his voice soft with memory. When we first arrived here, we lived in a one-room cabin with a dirt floor. She never complained. She just rolled up her sleeves and helped me build something better. She sounds remarkable, Felicity said. She was. He looked at Felicity then, really looked at her. But she would not want me to stop living because she is gone. She told me that near the end. Made me promise I would not let grief consume me. Did you keep that promise? No, he admitted. I built walls instead, threw myself into work until I was too exhausted to feel anything. It seemed easier than facing the pain. And now those walls are crumbling and I do not know what to do about it. His eyes held hers. You are doing that, Felicity. You are making me feel things I thought were dead and buried. Felicity's breath caught. Caleb, I know it is too soon. I know you came here to teach my daughters, not to deal with a broken man who does not know how to do this anymore. But I need you to know that when I look at you, I see possibility. I see tomorrow instead of just yesterday. Before Felicity could respond, Emma came running into the room. Papa. Miss Warren, come quick. One of the barn cats had kittens. The moment was broken, but the words hung in the air between them. Felicity followed Emma to the barn, her heart pounding, aware of Caleb walking beside her. The kittens were tiny and perfect, mewing blindly as their mother cleaned them. Emma was enchanted, and even Sarah abandoned her usual reserve to coo over the tiny creatures. "Can we keep them all, Papa?" Emma begged. "Please." "We can keep one when it is old enough to leave its mother," Caleb said firmly. "The others will go to families in town who need good mousers." "That is fair," Sarah said pragmatically. "But we get to choose first." As the girls debated the merits of each kitten, Caleb moved closer to Felicity. "We should talk," he said quietly. "Really talk. Tomorrow." Felicity agreed, but tomorrow came with unexpected complications. Felicity woke to the sound of raised voices downstairs. She dressed quickly and found Caleb in the main room with 3 men she had never seen before. They wore badges and grim expressions. "Mr. Rivers, we are not asking your permission," the tallest one said. "We are telling you that rustlers have been hitting ranches all up and down the valley. 6 different spreads have lost cattle in the last month. We are organizing a posse to track them down, and we need experienced men." "I have a ranch to run," Caleb said tightly. "I cannot just leave." "You have plenty of hands to keep things running for a few days. We need trackers, and you are the best in the county. Besides, they hit the Morrison place last night. Took 40 head and shot the Morrison boy when he tried to stop them. He will live, but barely." Caleb's expression darkened. "Shot him in the shoulder. These are not just thieves. They are dangerous men who will not hesitate to kill. That is why we need good men riding with us." Felicity saw the conflict on Caleb's face. He did not want to go, but he also would not turn his back on neighbors in need. "Give me an hour to make arrangements," he finally said. The lawman nodded and left. Caleb turned to find Felicity standing in the doorway. "You heard. Yes, you have to go." "I do not want to leave the girls. Or you." The admission made her heart skip, but she kept her voice practical. "The ranch will be fine. You have good men working for you, and Mrs. Chen and I can handle things with the girls. They need to learn that sometimes duty requires sacrifice." Caleb crossed the room to her, stopping close enough that she could see the worry in his eyes. "Felicity, these men are killers. If I do not come back, you will come back." She said it fiercely, as if saying it with enough conviction could make it true. "You will come back to your daughters and to this ranch and to—" She paused, suddenly shy. "To you?" he asked softly. "Yes, to me." He reached out and touched her cheek, his calloused hand gentle against her skin. "When I get back, we are going to have that talk. No more delays. No more circling around what is happening between us." "I will be here," Felicity promised. He left within the hour, saddled and provisioned for a pursuit that could take days. Felicity and the girls watched from the porch as he rode out with the posse, a group of determined men on strong horses. Emma cried, and even Sarah looked worried. Felicity gathered them both close. "Your father is strong and smart. He will be careful." "Mama said that too," Sarah whispered. "Before she went into labor with the baby, she said she would be fine, that we would have a new brother or sister by morning, but she was not fine." Felicity's throat tightened. "This is different, Sarah. Your father is not facing childbirth. He is facing something he has trained for his whole life. He knows this land, and he is riding with good men. Have faith." She tried to take her own advice over the next 3 days, but it was difficult. She kept the girls busy with lessons and chores, but her mind wandered constantly to Caleb. Was he safe? Had they found the rustlers? Would he keep his promise to come back on the 4th day? One of the ranch hands spotted riders approaching. Felicity's heart leaped until she realized there were only 5 men instead of the 8 who had left. Fear gripped her as she waited on the porch, the girls pressed against her sides. But then she saw Caleb at the front of the group, sitting tall in his saddle, and relief made her knees weak. The posse had succeeded. They had tracked the rustlers to a canyon hideout and, with the help of the territorial marshal who had joined them, arrested 6 men without bloodshed. The stolen cattle were being rounded up and returned to their owners. Caleb dismounted wearily, and his daughters ran to him. He caught them both in a fierce embrace, holding them as if he had been gone months instead of days. Over their heads, his eyes found Felicity's. The look he gave her was full of promise and something deeper, something that made her breath catch and her heart race. That evening, after supper and after the girls had finally been convinced to go to bed, Caleb found Felicity in the parlor. She was reading by lamplight, but she set the book aside when he entered. "We need to have that talk," he said without preamble. "We do." He sat beside her on the sofa, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I have been thinking the whole ride home about what to say, how to explain what has been happening, but I realized the simple truth is best." "What is the simple truth?" "That I am falling in love with you, Felicity Warren. That somewhere between watching you win over my daughters and hearing you play music in this house again and seeing you face down challenges without flinching, you became essential to me. I do not just want you here as their teacher. I want you here as my partner, my companion, my wife if you will have me." Felicity felt tears prick her eyes. "Caleb, I know I am not an easy man," he continued, the words tumbling out now. "I know I carry grief that will always be part of me. Margaret was my first love and I will never forget her. But I have learned that the heart is big enough for multiple chapters. What I felt for her does not diminish what I feel for you. They are different loves, but both are real." "I know that," Felicity said softly. "And I would never ask you to forget her or stop loving her memory. She gave you 2 beautiful daughters and years of happiness. That is worth honoring. So is what we could have together." He took her hand, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. "I love you, Felicity. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you see the best in people. I love how you laugh at Emma's silly jokes and how you help Sarah learn to trust again. I love that you are not afraid of hard work or this rough land. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you that." Felicity let the tears fall now. "I love you too. I think I started falling for you the first day, when I saw how much you loved your daughters even though you were terrible at showing it. I fell more with every gruff word that hit a tender heart. And I fell completely when I realized that you were not really broken, just wounded, and that with time and patience you could heal." Caleb pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, and smell the scent of horses and leather and sage that always clung to him. "Marry me," he said into her hair. "Not because the girls need a mother, though they do. Not because the ranch needs a woman's touch, though it does. But because I need you. Because life without you would only be half-lived. Because when I thought about not coming back from that posse, the thing I regretted most was not telling you how I feel." Felicity pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the chaste kisses Felicity had received from awkward suitors in Boston. This was fire and promise and homecoming all at once. His lips were warm and sure, and when his arms tightened around her, she felt safe and desired and completely alive. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably do this properly. Ask your father's permission and such." Felicity laughed. "My father stopped having a say in my life when he chose Theodore Ashworth over my happiness. This is our decision, no one else's. Fair enough. But I would like to ask the girls' permission. They have already lost one mother. I will not bring another into their lives without making sure they are ready." "They will say yes," Felicity said confidently. Emma asks me at least once a week when I am going to marry you and become her real mama." Caleb laughed, the sound rich and full. "Does she now? And what do you tell her?" "That these things take time. But I think we have taken enough time, do not you?" "I do." They told the girls the next morning at breakfast. Emma shrieked with joy and knocked over her milk in her excitement. Sarah smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes, and said simply, "Good. I hoped you would." Mrs. Chen hugged Felicity tight and whispered, "I told you he was a good man. And you have brought him back to life." The wedding was planned for 6 weeks later, giving Felicity time to make a proper dress and send word to her parents. She did not expect them to come, and she was not disappointed when their response was a curt letter stating that she had made her bed and must lie in it. Her brother, however, sent a warm note of congratulation and a gift of money to help with wedding expenses. The whole town of Durango turned out for the ceremony, held in the small church on the edge of town. Felicity wore a cream-colored dress she had sewn herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Sarah and Emma stood beside her as her attendants, wearing matching blue dresses that brought out their eyes. Caleb stood at the front of the church in a new suit, his hair neatly trimmed and his face shaved smooth. When Felicity walked down the aisle, his eyes filled with tears, and he did not bother to hide them. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but Felicity barely heard the traditional words. She was too busy looking at Caleb, at the man she had come to love with her whole heart. When it came time for vows, Caleb took her hands in his. "Felicity, I promise to love you with everything I am. I promise to build a life with you based on honesty and respect. I promise to be your partner in all things, to support your dreams as you have supported mine. I promise to make you laugh and to hold you when you cry. And I promise to thank God every day that you answered that advertisement and came to teach my daughters." Felicity's own vows were similarly heartfelt. "Caleb, I promise to love you and your daughters as my own family. I promise to stand beside you through good times and hard times. I promise to make this house a home filled with love and laughter and music. I promise to honor the woman who came before me and to build on the foundation she laid. And I promise that every single day I will choose you, choose us, choose this beautiful life we are building together." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed her thoroughly, to the delight of the congregation and the embarrassed giggles of his daughters. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed everyone in the valley. Neighbors brought dishes to share, and someone produced a fiddle. As the sun set over the mountains, Caleb led Felicity in a dance while everyone clapped and cheered. "Happy?" he asked, spinning her in a circle. "Deliriously," she said, laughing. "Though I still cannot quite believe this is real. 6 months ago I was in Boston, miserable and trapped. Now I am here, married to you with 2 wonderful daughters and a whole new life ahead of me." "Believe it," Caleb said, pulling her close. "This is real. You are my wife, and I intend to spend every day making sure you never regret choosing this life." That night, after the guests had gone home and the girls were asleep, Caleb carried Felicity over the threshold of their bedroom. It was the master bedroom, the one he had shared with Margaret, but it had been completely redecorated. New curtains, new bedding, new furniture, a fresh start. "I wanted it to be ours," Caleb said, setting her down gently. "Not a shrine to the past, but a place for our future." Felicity touched his face, feeling the roughness of new stubble. "You are a good man, Caleb Rivers." "I am a lucky man," he corrected. "Lucky that you took a chance on a gruff rancher and his wild daughters." What happened next was tender and sweet, and everything Felicity had dreamed of. Caleb was patient and gentle, treating her like something precious. And when they finally came together, it felt like coming home. Afterward, Lying in his arms with her head on his chest, Felicity felt a peace she had never known before. This was where she belonged. Not in a Boston mansion, not trying to please parents who would never be satisfied, but here in this rough-hewn ranch house with this strong, tender man and his loving daughters. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Caleb replied, his arms tightening around her. Forever. The first year of their marriage flew by in a blur of happiness. Felicity continued teaching the girls, but now with the added authority of being their stepmother. Sarah blossomed under the stability, becoming a confident young woman who dreamed of one day teaching in Durango's school. Emma remained irrepressibly cheerful, bringing light and laughter to every day. Caleb gradually opened up more, letting Felicity into the deepest parts of his heart. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's dreams and fears. He taught her to ride like a true rancher, and she taught him that it was all right to show emotion, to laugh loudly and love openly. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Felicity had a head for numbers and helped Caleb keep better accounts. She also suggested breeding not just quarter horses, but also fancier breeds that could be sold to wealthy buyers back east. Her connections in Boston, strained though they were, proved useful in making those contacts. In the spring of 1879, Felicity discovered she was expecting a child. The news filled Caleb with both joy and terror. "I cannot lose you," he said, holding her tight. "I cannot go through that again." "You will not," Felicity assured him, though her own fear fluttered beneath the surface. Childbirth was dangerous, especially out here far from proper medical care. But she had youth on her side, and Mrs. Chen, who had helped deliver half the babies in the valley. Sarah and Emma were thrilled at the prospect of a new sibling. They helped Felicity prepare the nursery and made tiny clothes with clumsy, loving stitches. When her time came in late October, the labor was long and difficult. Caleb paced outside the bedroom door like a caged animal, refusing to leave despite the ranch hands telling him he should go work to keep his mind off things. But when Mrs. Chen finally emerged, exhausted but smiling, and said, "You have a healthy son, Mr. Rivers." His legs nearly gave out. He rushed into the room to find Felicity propped up in bed, sweaty and tired but beaming. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. "Meet Matthew Caleb Rivers," she said softly. "Matthew, meet your papa." Caleb took the baby with trembling hands, staring down at the tiny face with wonder. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are perfect. I love you so much. I love you too." Felicity watched her husband cradle their son, and her heart felt so full it might burst. This was everything she had never known she wanted. The girls were allowed in to meet their new brother, and they took turns holding him with careful supervision. Sarah declared him the most beautiful baby ever born, and Emma announced she would teach him everything important, like how to catch frogs and climb trees. Life settled into a new rhythm. Felicity balanced caring for baby Matthew with continuing to teach the girls and help manage the ranch. Caleb was a devoted father, waking in the night to walk the baby when he cried, changing nappies without complaint, and staring at his son with such love it brought tears to Felicity's eyes. "I had forgotten what this felt like," he admitted one evening, rocking Matthew to sleep while Felicity worked on Sarah's algebra lessons. "The wonder of it, the miracle." "It is different this time, is it not?" Felicity asked gently. "You can appreciate it without the fear that weighed you down before." "I still have fear," Caleb admitted. "But yes, it is different. I am different. You helped me heal enough to be fully present for this instead of locked in my own grief." As Matthew grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to thrive. Caleb expanded the horse breeding operation, and Felicity's contacts bore fruit with several large sales to buyers in New York and Philadelphia. They hired more hands and built new facilities. Sarah, now 13, was talking about attending normal school to become a teacher. Felicity worked with her on advanced subjects, preparing her for the entrance examinations. Emma, 11, had discovered a talent for drawing and filled sketchbooks with detailed pictures of ranch life. In 1881, Felicity gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Margaret after Caleb's first wife. It was Felicity's idea, and it made Caleb cry. "You do not have to do that," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to," Felicity insisted. "She was part of your life and part of the girls' lives. Honoring that does not diminish what we have. It enriches it." Little Maggie, as they called her, was a sunny child with Felicity's dark hair and Caleb's blue-gray eyes. Sarah and Emma doted on their baby sister, and Matthew was fascinated by the tiny creature who shared his nursery. The years rolled on, bringing both challenges and joys. There were hard winters when they lost livestock and worried about making ends meet. There were illnesses that terrified them, though thankfully everyone always recovered. There were arguments and disagreements because no marriage is without conflict, but through it all, the love between Caleb and Felicity only grew stronger. They had built something real and lasting, something based on mutual respect and genuine affection. In 1883, Sarah left for normal school in Denver, a bittersweet day for the whole family. She was ready, eager even, but Caleb cried as he hugged his eldest daughter goodbye. "I am so proud of you," he told her. "Your mother would be proud too, both of your mothers." Sarah hugged Felicity tight. "Thank you for everything you taught me, for showing me that learning can open up the whole world. I am going to be a good teacher because I had a good teacher." Emma thrived in Sarah's absence, stepping into the role of eldest child at home with enthusiasm. She helped with Matthew and Maggie, taught them to ride and rope, and all the skills she had learned from her father. In 1885, when Matthew was 6 and Maggie was 4, Felicity gave birth to their third child together, another son they named Thomas. The delivery was easier than the previous two, and Felicity recovered quickly. 3 children, Caleb marveled, looking at his expanded family around the dinner table. 5 if you count Sarah away at school and Emma here. I never imagined my life would be this full again. Do you remember what you said to me before we got married?" Felicity asked that night as they lay in bed, baby Thomas sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby. "That your heart was big enough for multiple chapters. I do. You were right. We have written a beautiful chapter together, Caleb, and there are still so many pages left to fill." He pulled her close, kissing her temple. "I cannot wait to see what we write next." In 1888, Sarah returned to Durango with a teaching certificate and a fiancé, a fellow teacher named Daniel Morrison, son of the rancher who had been shot by rustlers all those years ago. The wedding was a grand affair, and Caleb walked Sarah down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. "I am not losing a daughter," Felicity reminded him gently. "She is just adding to our family." "I know," Caleb said, wiping his eyes, "but they grow up so fast." "It seems like yesterday she was a wild 8-year-old testing your patience." Emma followed her sister's path to normal school in 1889, though she focused on art education rather than general teaching. She wanted to bring art programs to rural schools that could not afford proper instruction. Matthew and Maggie grew like weeds, both tall and sturdy like their father. Thomas toddled after them, trying to keep up with his older siblings. In 1891, Felicity discovered she was expecting again, to both their surprise. At 35, she had thought her childbearing years were behind her. "Apparently not," the doctor said with a smile. You are healthy and strong. I see no reason to worry." This pregnancy was harder than the others, and Caleb hovered anxiously. But in early 1892, Felicity delivered healthy twin girls named Grace and Hope. "Twins," Caleb said, holding one in each arm with practiced ease. "You never do anything halfway, do you?" "Apparently neither do you," Felicity teased, exhausted but happy. The house was full to bursting now with 5 children at home, though Matthew was already talking about working on the ranch full-time instead of continuing his schooling. At 13, he had his father's build and his mother's sharp mind. Sarah and Daniel had settled in Durango, where Sarah taught at the local school and Daniel worked as the assistant principal. They visited the ranch often, and in 1893 they announced Sarah was expecting her first child. "I am going to be a grandmother," Felicity said in wonder. "How is that possible when I still feel like a young bride?" "Time is funny that way," Caleb said, pulling her into his arms. They were in their bedroom, a rare quiet moment with the twins napping and the older children occupied elsewhere. "But I would not change a single moment of the last 14 years. Not even the hard times," Felicity asked. "Especially not the hard times. They made us stronger, made us appreciate the good times more fully." He kissed her softly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Felicity Rivers. You brought me back to life when I thought I was done living. You gave me more children when I thought that chapter was closed. You filled this house with love and laughter and music again." "You did the same for me," Felicity said, touching his face. There was silver in his hair now and lines around his eyes, but he was still the most handsome man she had ever known. "You gave me a home when I was adrift. You gave me a family when mine rejected me. You loved me when I was sure I would never find real love." They kissed, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that came from years of knowing each other completely. "Papa! Mama!" Maggie's voice called from downstairs. Grace spit up all over Hope. Caleb and Felicity looked at each other and laughed. "Duty calls," Felicity said. "It always does," Caleb agreed. "But I would not have it any other way." Sarah's baby, a boy named Caleb after his grandfather, was born in late 1893. The whole family gathered for the christening, and seeing Caleb hold his first grandchild was a moment Felicity knew she would treasure forever. Emma returned from Denver in 1894 with a proposal to start an art program in Durango's school. The town council approved it, and she moved back home while she set up the program. She also brought with her a young man named Lucas Wright, a fellow artist who had completely won her heart. "He is a good man," Emma told Felicity. "Like Papa. He sees the world in colors and light, and he wants to use his art to make people's lives better." The wedding was in the spring of 1895, a joyful celebration that brought the whole valley together. Caleb walked another daughter down the aisle, and this time he did not cry quite as much. "I am getting better at this," he told Felicity. "Or you are just getting used to our girls growing up," she replied. Life continued its steady rhythm. The ranch prospered, and Caleb gradually turned more of the daily operations over to Matthew, who had a gift for managing both the land and the men. Thomas showed an interest in the horse breeding side of things, spending hours with the mares and foals. The twins, Grace and Hope, were mirror images of each other in appearance but complete opposites in temperament. Grace was bold and adventurous, while Hope was gentle and thoughtful. Together, they were a formidable team. In 1897, on their 19th wedding anniversary, Caleb surprised Felicity with a trip to Denver. It was the first time they had been alone together for more than a few hours since the twins were born. "Mrs. Chen is watching the younger children, and Matthew is perfectly capable of managing the ranch for a week," Caleb said when Felicity protested. We are going to remember what it is like to just be Caleb and Felicity, not Mama and Papa. Denver was exciting and modern, with electric lights and paved streets. But what Felicity treasured most was the time with her husband. They walked through parks, ate in nice restaurants, and talked for hours. On their last night, sitting in their hotel room overlooking the city, Caleb took her hand. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Leaving Boston, coming west, tying your life to mine?" "Never," Felicity said firmly. "Not for a single moment. This life we have built together is worth more than all the comfort and refinement Boston could have offered. I found my purpose here, teaching your daughters and our children. I found my home here in this wild, beautiful land. But most of all, I found you." "I found myself again because of you," Caleb said. "I was so lost in grief that I had forgotten who I was beyond it. You reminded me that I could still feel joy, still love, still build a future worth living. You are my everything, Felicity." They made love that night with the passion of newlyweds, but the depth of two people who truly knew each other. And when they returned to the ranch the next week, they came back refreshed, and even more committed to the beautiful life they were living. The turn of the century brought changes. Sarah and Daniel had 3 children now, and Emma and Lucas had 2. The ranch house, expanded multiple times over the years, was always full of grandchildren during holidays. Matthew married a sweet girl named Alice from town, and they built a house on the ranch property. Thomas followed his brother's example, marrying Clara, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and they too stayed close to home. Grace and Hope, inseparable as always, both wanted to go to college back east. Caleb was hesitant, remembering how Felicity had left Boston and never returned, but Felicity encouraged him to let them go. "They need to see the world and make their own choices," she said. "We raised them to be strong and independent. Trust them to come home if that is what they choose." The twins left for Wellesley College in 1900, leaving the ranch house strangely quiet. Caleb and Felicity, now in their early 50s, found themselves almost alone for the first time in over 2 decades. "What do we do with ourselves now?" Caleb asked, only half joking. "Whatever we want," Felicity said with a smile. "We have raised 7 children between us. We have built a successful ranch. We have loved each other well. Maybe now we get to simply enjoy the fruits of all that labor." They did enjoy it. They traveled more, visiting the grandchildren scattered across Colorado. They hosted gatherings that brought the whole extended family together. They sat on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set over the mountains, content in each other's company. In 1903, both twins returned from college, Grace with a degree in literature and Hope with one in music. They had seen the wider world and chosen to come home, just as Felicity had predicted. Grace became a teacher in Durango, and Hope gave music lessons, filling the town with the same gift Felicity had brought years earlier. In 1908, on their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled every room, and the noise was tremendous. Caleb stood on the porch and looked at the chaos with a smile. 30 years, he said to Felicity, who stood beside him. "It has been the best 30 years of my life." "Mine too," Felicity agreed. She looked at him, at the silver hair and the weathered face and the eyes that still looked at her with such love. "We have built something amazing, have we not? Not just this ranch, but this family, this legacy of love." "We have," Caleb agreed. "And it all started because a brave young woman answered an advertisement and came west to teach my daughters. I hired a governess and found a soulmate. And I came looking for escape and found my purpose," Felicity added. She leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him. "I love you, Caleb Rivers, today and always. I love you too, Felicity, forever and beyond." Inside, someone started playing the piano. It was Hope playing Greensleeves, the song that had started it all. The grandchildren gathered around and voices rose in song. Caleb took Felicity's hand and led her inside. They stood in the doorway of the parlor, watching their family make music together, and Felicity felt her heart swell with gratitude. This was what love really meant. Not grand gestures or flowery words, though those had their place. Real love meant showing up every day. It meant working through grief and fear and doubt. It meant building something together brick by brick, year by year. It meant creating a family not just by blood but by choice and commitment. The rancher had learned what love really meant when the teacher came to instruct his daughters. And together, they had built a life that would echo through generations, a testament to the power of second chances and the courage to open your heart even after it has been broken. As the last notes of Greensleeves faded and the family burst into applause, Caleb pulled Felicity close and kissed her soundly, to the delight of their children and grandchildren. "Here is to the next 30 years," he said. "And beyond," Felicity added. Outside, the Colorado sun set over the ranch they had built together, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The cattle lowed in distant pastures and horses whinnied in the barns. The land they had worked and loved stretched out in every direction, wild and beautiful and home. And in the house filled with music and laughter and love, two people who had found each other against all odds held each other close and gave thanks for the beautiful life they had created together. A life that had begun with an advertisement in a Boston newspaper and a young woman brave enough to seek a better future. A life that had been enriched by a broken man willing to heal and love again. A life that would continue through the children and grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. This was their happily ever after, hard-won and deeply cherished. And it was more than either of them had ever dreamed possible on that dusty day in August 1878, when Felicity Warren stepped off a stagecoach in Durango and into the arms of her destiny.